What a disaster again! From the opening tip to mid-October to the final buzzer last night, in terms of television ratings, this NBA season has been an absolute disaster. For the fourth consecutive year, NBA ratings in the pooper. And for some reason, the mainstream media, they are strangely silent. I wonder why. I wonder if it has anything to do with the fact that the media has run out of excuses for the NBA. I wonder if it's got anything to do with the fact that leagues like the NFL, the NHL, they are seeing massive growth in their ratings. Hell, even a dump like the WNBA is growing their audience. Now, of course, the dump had nowhere to go but up. It is a little bit easier to grow your audience when your starting point is nothing. But either way, the WNBA is growing. We'll probably get into that later on this afternoon. Everyone seems to be growing. Everyone seems to be thriving except the NBA. If the NFL was struggling like this, it would be headline news throughout the mainstream media. If Donald Trump, if Donald Trump dropped 0.5% in the polls, the media, they would organize an impromptu butt bongo festival. But when the NBA is struggling for the fourth consecutive year, it is absolute silence. Not only has the mainstream media ignored the ratings, they have damn near ignored the entire NBA Finals. If you haven't already, make sure to like and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at KC_BTL84. Friday night was Game 4 of the NBA Finals. If the mainstream media were to put in the effort to make excuses, they would blame the low ratings on a painfully boring, uncompetitive series. And they would blame these record low ratings on the fact that the game was played on a Friday night, which is typically the worst night of the week for television viewership. Never mind the fact that NBA games have been played on Friday nights for decades and didn't seem to have a problem drawing ratings then. But if the media cared enough to make excuses, those are the excuses they would make. Game 4, Friday night. 9.6 million viewers. If you remove the two COVID years when Aunt Fauci was passionately spreading his love, this was the least watched game of the NBA Finals since 2007. Basically, this was the second least watched game of the NBA Finals since the 1980s when ratings started to be recorded. Well, KC, this is understandable. This game was a blowout. Oh, yeah? Is that your excuse? Back in 2018, Stevie Kerr and the Rainbow Warriors, they were up 3-0 going into Game 4 of the NBA Finals against LeBron James. There was a celebration that night in the city of Rainbows because the Warriors closed out the series, winning Game 4 by 23 points. Over 16 million people watched Game 4 in 2018. Same scenario the year before. Warriors are up 3-0. They got blown out in Game 4 by LeBron. Over 19 million people fell asleep watching that painfully boring game. Now, it's not like this was all that long ago, so what is the difference between 2017, 2018, and 2024? There are a variety of reasons as to why the NBA is struggling. Adam Silver and LeBron James, they have alienated the casual fan base. The series between Boston and Dallas sucked. Kyrie Irving was a ghost for most of the series. There was a complete lack of star power. The Celtics, they are a very likable team, but they just don't have a mainstream star. They don't have a charismatic, magnetic player who is capable of drawing in the casual viewer. In the past, legacy teams in major markets, that was enough to draw good ratings for the NBA. That is no longer the case. Nothing seems to be working. 2 years ago, it was Warriors Celtics in the NBA Finals, and they could not attract the yentas on The View to a wet fart. Now, I think one of the reasons the NBA Finals struggled this year was the complete lack of mainstream media coverage. Now, I'm not talking about ESPN. The worldwide leader in woke, they have to cover the NBA because, you know, it's the only thing keeping their Titanic from submerging into the woke sea. When I say lack of mainstream media coverage, I'm talking about the entire media. One of the reasons there was a lack of coverage, the media, they were busy focusing on Caitlin Clark. Well, KC, don't you mean they were focused on the WNBA? No, I meant exactly what I said. They were focused on Caitlin Clark. I'm sure another reason for the lack of media coverage was the uncompetitive series and the complete lack of interest from the casual fan base. But at the same time, that hasn't stopped the media from relentlessly covering the NBA in the past. Last night, as I'm watching the celebration in Boston, I'm watching, I think it was Lisa Salters interview Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Joe Mazzulla. As I'm watching these interviews, I noticed a similarity between all three of them. Before they answered any questions related to basketball, before they answered any questions about being overcome with emotion about what they had just achieved, all three faces of the Boston Celtics, they took time to thank God. Every one of them. As I'm watching last night, I knew this would make them more appealing to the average American. I also knew it would make them pariahs in the mainstream media. As you guys know, the woke media, they are allergic to three things: God, truth, and Trump. But it got me to wondering if this lack of media coverage with the NBA Finals had anything to do with the fact that the Celtics are led by three Christian dudes. Remember what happened between Game 1 and Game 2 of the Finals? Joe Mazzulla was giving a press conference and some wanker spanker in the media asked how it felt to have two black head coaches involved in the Finals. Now, if that question was given to Stevie Kerr, he probably would have said something like, it's great to see diversity in the NBA. As I was watching the game last night, I saw 10 black players on the court and 2 black coaches on the sidelines. It brought tears to my eyes thinking of this abundance of diversity. Unlike Stevie Kerr, who moonlights as interim pastor at Woke United Methodist, Joe Mazzulla, he spends his Sunday mornings in a real church. Watch how he responded to the shit sandwich. Roll the film.
For the first time since 1975, this is the NBA Finals where you have 2 black head coaches. Do you think this is a significant moment? Do you take pride in this? How do you view this, or do you not see it at all?
I wonder how many of those have been Christian coaches. David Aldridge?
Going into the NBA Finals, there was already less media coverage than usual. In his infinite wisdom, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, he decided it would be a great idea to wait a full week to start the NBA Finals, which destroyed any and all momentum that was built during the conference finals. But after this press conference with Joe Mazzulla, media coverage of the finals seemed to disappear. Now, obviously, all of this is speculation on my part, but I'm just wondering if the media isn't heavily covering the finals, mainly the Celtics, because the leaders of the team worship God instead of worshiping the woke oak tree. Just something to think about. But like I said earlier, there are a variety of reasons the NBA is struggling. Even though it's been 4 years since this happened, the main reason the NBA continues to struggle is because LeBron James and Adam Silver accused over half the fan base of mythical racism. How many people voted for the Trumper in 2020? Was it over 80 million? Those 80 million people, LeBron James and Adam Silver, they told them, we don't want your business. That group of 80 million, they didn't fight, they didn't argue, they simply turned the NBA off and never returned. Now, LeBron James is experiencing how it feels when Behind the Line proudly presents to you another exciting edition of The Woke, turning on The Woke. Yesterday, LeBron James, he was heavily criticized by the woke media, mainly Stevie A. Smith at the worldwide leader in woke, ESPN. Several months ago, LeBron James, he launched a podcast with JJ Redick. Now, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. The show is excellent. They don't talk about mythical racism. They don't preach the good word and spread the woke faith. The show features 2 of the greatest minds in basketball talking about basketball. For some reason, though, black head coaches in the NBA, along with their pretend friends in the mainstream media, they've got a real problem with this podcast. Now, keep in mind, this is the same media that praised LeBron James when the podcast was launched. Stevie A. Smith, he was highly complimentary. The podcast was critically acclaimed. But all of a sudden, when black head coaches in the NBA express their disdain towards the podcast, suddenly the media has a problem with it. Watch for yourself.
Black coaches called me expressing how they took issue with that podcast taking place. And I think you know enough to know that that's true. Some of them felt very salty about that. We certainly are not blaming JJ Redick.
They were salty because he chose to do a podcast with a white guy or because it hurt Darvin Ham?
Because it hurt Darvin
Got it,
Ham.
okay.
Because it hurt Darvin Ham. When the news came out, hell, we celebrated it right here on this show. Oh, it's going to be great. It's mind the game. They're talking the game. I mean, they're talking basketball. It's fantastic. No problem. But as the podcast gained steam, and then the spotlight became more magnifying for Darvin Ham, and then you saw an Anthony Davis after game 2 against Denver talk about how lost and, you know, we just weren't on the same page. We just seemed to be out of sync, et cetera, et cetera. We saw all of these things. LeBron's had all of these coaches. You've never really heard him speak up for a coach, even though Rich Paul and them would say he spoke up for Ty Lue and stuff like that. We looked at all of those things, and we said, you take all of those things into account, this does not look good.
For starters, LeBron James does not need a podcast to get a coach fired. This dude has been getting head coaches fired his entire NBA career. If I remember correctly, I think LeBron tried to get Eric Spoelstra fired in Miami. So he doesn't need some doofus podcast to get a coach fired. Number 2, I really don't understand the problem here. I haven't seen black coaches in the NBA upset because Draymond Green has a podcast. I haven't seen black coaches upset because CJ McCollum has a podcast. You mean to tell me LeBron James doing a podcast with JJ Redick is one of the reasons that Darvin Ham was fired by the Lakers? If that's the case, can we please get some of that magic in New Orleans? Can we get the Weasel Willie Green and Captain Doofus David Griffin fired because CJ McCollum has a podcast? Darvin Ham wasn't fired because LeBron James is collaborating with JJ Redick. Darvin Ham was fired because LeBron needed someone to blame for the Lakers' huge embarrassing failure. Whether he has a podcast or not is completely irrelevant. He's been doing that barbershop show or whatever the hell it was called for years now. No one seemed to have a problem with it then, but when LeBron teams up with JJ Redick, all of a sudden, black head coaches and the mainstream media have a problem with it. I wonder why. Give me your thoughts on this. Ratings for the NBA Finals continue setting near record lows. How does Adam Silver still have a job? Is there anyone who sucks at their job more than Adam Silver? I cannot believe NBC is about to overpay for the NBA. And I can't believe the NBA, which is struggling to draw ratings on free television, I can't believe they are going to give themselves less exposure by putting games on Peacock. What can be done to revive the NBA? Is there any way to recapture the interest of the casual fan base? You let me know. Sound off in the comments below. Like, subscribe, share the video. Appreciate your support. Best way to contact me is by email at btlkc84@gmail.com, and I'll see you guys later.